I get a bunch of questions about extensive, always relating back to jumping. Everybody wants to ask about extensive jumps. What we need to understand is that extensive doesn't relate just to jumping. It relates to everything: sprinting, jumping, med ball throws, lifting. Extensive, it just means it's submaximal by nature. We are using a reduced intensity. Tempo runs are a form of extensive sprinting in Charlie Francis's system. Sprints at 75% max intensity or less. Extensive means give us an opportunity to learn the movement and to develop skill at a reduced intensity. You don't walk in the weight room the first day and put 95 or 100% on the barbell and start using that as your training. Some programs might. I would highly disagree with that, but we need a gradual ramp up, especially if you've had downtime from training, from skill development. We need a gradual ramp up in intensity, and that's that extensive to intensive model. What starts as extensive means in the first 3 to 6 weeks, as you intensify, you start to introduce new means to create adaptation. You start to introduce new exercises, higher intensities, and those extensive means no longer serve to create adaptation. So what do? Those extensive means can now be moved to low intensity days, as they're not the main training mean anymore. We can still get a high volume of work done on those low intensity days that are not stressful to the body. So extensive doesn't always relate just to jumping. It's a foundational principle of our program. Extensive can be anything in our program, just at a submaximal or reduced intensity.